Live from the offices of Great River Investments in the beautiful city of Burlington, Iowa, this is the Marvin Knows Finances show. I am your host, Marvin Thomson, your certified financial planner, and joining me today is Joe Jolin of Jolin Media in West Burlington, Iowa, and Todd Sladky, CPA, also with Great River Investments. Thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to listen in, and as always, for all you listeners on Google Podcasts and Spotify, don't forget to click the subscribe button. If you prefer to see how we make this show come together, please check out our YouTube channel, Marvin Knows Finances, and click subscribe there as well. Just like the last and every time, I have to take care of a little business before we get moving too far forward to make sure my compliance department stays happy and allows me to continue to bring you this wonderful show. Marvin Thomson is an investment advisor and a registered investment advisor with Brokers Financial Member SIPC. Opinions expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect those of Brokers Financial. The topics discussed and opinions given are not intended to address the specific needs of any listener. Great River Investments, LLC does not offer legal or tax advice. Listeners are encouraged to discuss their financial needs with the appropriate professional regarding your individual circumstances. Well, gentlemen, welcome today. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, so we've taken a little bit of a hiatus from recording the podcast for a few weeks. We've had a few changes. We're going to retool the show a little bit. And pretty excited to have you guys joining me from now on out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So you guys want to go ahead and give yourselves a little bit of a background to our listeners about what you're doing and so forth?
Want me to go?
Yeah, Todd, go first.
I'm Todd Sladky. I am a retired finance officer from the hospital industry. I've been in healthcare since 1991. Prior to that, I was a CPA in a CPA firm, mostly doing audit work, but also some tax, individual tax and corporate tax. I have been retired for about 3 years now and am actually helping out with Marvin on running some financial plans, doing some of the background number crunch work. It's something I've always had a passion about. I'm a big follower of various publications, podcasts, radio shows about finance and have been my whole life. And I just have a real interest in personal finance and feel like I have some good tools and good knowledge to use, to provide, to share. And so that's why I'm tied up with Marvin.
And it also helps that you're one of the smartest men I've ever met in my life. So
Thank you.
That's another
Amen.
help too.
Yeah.
So, Joe, what about you, bud?
Yeah, so my name is Joe Jolin. I've kind of been around in our area as far as working with other corporations, helping them out with marketing. And then in this last year, I decided to kind of jump ship and go my own route and work with small businesses on, I guess, applying some of the same techniques that large corporations use in marketing to small business. So I started Jolin Media, and things have been going great since.
Yeah, and I'm super impressed with Joe's quality of work, the video recording, the podcast recording, the print materials, everything top notch.
Website to come.
Hey, yeah,
Website, definitely. Website. So, gentlemen, today our topic is good debt versus bad debt. A lot of talk about debt right now in the world. But before we get to that, let's talk about our question of the week. So, a client came to me and said, I am getting ready to pay off my car and want to use my credit card so they give me the points when I make this purchase. Is this a good idea? By the way, I have the cash to pay off the car. Okay. So I did not like this question because if you listen to any of my previous podcasts, you understand my displeasure with credit cards and so forth. And it's also been said that nobody ever got rich off of credit card points. You know, have you guys seen those commercials on TV where the business owners are like, yeah, I use my credit card points to pay for my medical insurance or my advertising insurance?
Yes.
You know, if you get 1% back, you have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to afford your insurance and stuff like that.
You need to be running a lot of money through
You
a
need to
credit
be
card.
running a lot of money through a credit card, and I don't see the benefit of that at all. So the answer to that question that the client received from me was no. We do not think this is a good idea because it's like dancing with the devil almost. Why bother using a credit card to pay it off when you have the cash to pay it off? I mean, what do you realistically get? 120 points on a $12,000 payoff or something like that? It's just not worth it. So what we said is if you have the cash, just write a check and pay off the car and stop messing around. And keep in mind that when you try to play this game, Murphy's Law generally tends to come up and bite you in the butt. Because all of a sudden you use the credit card, you owe $10,000, $12,000 to pay off the credit card, and then whammo, the furnace goes out. And the cash that you were going to use to pay off the credit card is now being used to pay for the furnace and so forth. So it reminds me of a gambler who says, I got a free room at the casino. I got a free meal at the casino because the credit card's giving you points. It's a big mind game. So the answer is absolutely not. If you have the cash, folks, pay it off, move on, and so forth.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then the one other point that most people probably don't think of at all, but if it's an organization that you care about, let's say you're, in this case, it's a car purchase, so you're probably not really caring about the bank that you're paying off and so on with that card. But if it's, let's say you're doing your donations to a church and you're doing it through a card, and or you have a local business that's the floral shop in town that you're using a credit card, but you could just as well use cash. Somebody has to pay for that. So those points they're giving you come at a cost to the person who's doing the sale, basically, or the person receiving the donation. There's a 2 to 5% fee that they're paying. So if you give a $100 donation to your church and you do it by card, they're getting $95 instead of the $100. So if it's an organization you care about that way, it's probably best to go ahead and use cash or a check, and it is more, it's a better business thing for that local provider.
Good point. So that takes us into our actual topic in the day, the good debt for the bad debt versus the bad debt. And we're going to bring up credit cards right off the bat. Okay. Credit card companies are massive. They're monstrous. They have departments that focus on how do you get people to use their product. Okay. Now, I'm not telling everybody out there to never have a credit card. I don't go as far as like Dave Ramsey does and says no credit cards whatsoever. I feel there are people out there who can use credit cards, responsibly, pay it off each month, not get themselves in big trouble. But as we mentioned before, the average family has something like 5 to 7 credit cards per household and carries around $10,000 average debt. Now, if the average interest rate on a credit card is 14%, it doesn't take long to get yourselves in trouble. So I'm going to put credit cards definitely in the bad category. And like I said, I want you to keep in mind, it's an emotional game when you are using these credit cards. You almost feel like you can spend more as opposed to handing cash to the teller and stuff like that. So,
and that's kind of been proven out. I mean, I don't really have the study on that, but it has been proven out. If you have to lay $20 bills down on a table, there's a different hurt to that than there is to just plug your card in the machine and go. And then the hurt comes a month later, and sometimes with interest and fees.
Well, that's the other part about it too, is the interest and fees, because it's ridiculous. If you owe $10,000 and you get a bill that says you owe me a minimum of $200, you're never really ever getting anywhere on paying off that credit card.
A lot of people do focus in on that minimum amount due, and it barely covers the interest. So if you're putting new charges on the next month, you're just digging a hole.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the credit cards and the emotions. Todd just mentioned it. It's a different hurt when you reach into your wallet and you pull out a bill. A $100 bill coming out of your wallet versus a $100 charge on a credit card is way different mentally. It's the same amount of money, but it does feel different. So you really want to be careful when you're using these credit cards. Another thing, of course, is when you're in situations where you feel like you need something. I always use the expression, you don't necessarily need a 50-inch TV today. So
You need 55.
You need 55, you need 60, and it gets easier and easier with that credit card to do those types of things. So it's not a wise investment. It's something that we say, if you can handle it responsibly, then by all means have a credit card. Enjoy the points programs. They do benefit you a little bit in that aspect. But if you're one of those people out there who just continuously use your card, rack up the credit, rack up the debt, it's by no means a good thing. No means a good thing. So guys, when you hear people talk about, well, my credit card is interest free, what do you think? I have a 0% interest on my credit card.
Yeah, like the 6-month, purchase the furniture,
Yes.
don't pay for 18 months, that
Yes.
kind of thing. So my understanding is that they will be true to that unless you slip up. So if you slip up for 1 month, they will go back and say, all of that interest that we didn't charge from 6 months ago through now, you missed a payment, you hiccuped, and they go after it. So all of a sudden it all becomes
It all becomes.
It all becomes
Yep.
interest you are owing.
So Todd, what you're saying is that I shouldn't go to my local furniture store and do a 0% 5-year no payment, no interest type of arrangement when my furniture is probably not even going to last 5 years.
I would not. Yeah, if your dogs and kids are going to ruin it in 2 years, but you're still paying for it 5 years from now,
Yeah.
not a good idea.
Might be better to go to the Salvation Army and something like that and look for a good used couch in that
That's
case.
right.
Yeah. Do you happen to know what the interest rate on those credit cards are for the furniture stores?
I would think in the 24% range.
24%. Yep. 24%, I think, is the last time I heard our local furniture store was using. And they're a very well-known furniture store, too. So people, be careful when you're out or when you're doing that kind of stuff. So I have a client right now who is trying to get out of credit card debt, and she keeps telling me that she shouldn't pay it off because it is interest-free. It's 0% interest, and she can make more money on her investments than by paying it off. What do you guys think of that?
I am a debt-averse guy, very debt-averse. And I think there is an emotional cost to that thinking. And, some people would disagree with me, and I'm totally fine that they disagree with me. But there is a satisfaction to knowing that you don't have that monthly bill hanging out there, that income coming into you are more in control of what you're going to do with it that month, as opposed to, hey, I got these 5 credit card bills. They all have a $100 payment I should be making on them. I got my house payment to make. I got to buy groceries and put gas in my car, and all of a sudden, that check that I got, it's gone before I really get to do anything with it.
Yep, 100%. Joe, what about you?
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just don't believe in carrying debt. That's the bottom line. All right, so credit card debt, we obviously know what we feel about that. Let's talk about car loans and student loan debt. Student loan debt is quickly either catching or passing credit card debt in this country. And I should have looked up the exact figure of student loan debt. I've mentioned it before on the show. But student loan debt is a real big problem. But I really start to see people talking about it more and more and more. It's becoming very impressive, this generation of children getting ready to go to college. Some of them are seriously looking at it and going, do I need to go to college? Joe, you and I were talking earlier this morning about you have a son who wants to get into the same type of work that you're doing right now. Is it necessary for him to go rack up $20,000, $40,000, $60,000 of student loan debt to do it when he can get perfectly good hands-on experience? And in 99% of the time nowadays, you can go on to YouTube and you can just Google search or YouTube search how to do, podcast recording as an example.
Yeah, what I find fascinating is that, like you said, back when you and I were in college, it was just kind of the norm. I mean, you go to college and you just know you're going to get, you're just going to rack up student debt. And I don't know, I guess I haven't been paying attention, but between our time and now time, there was in the middle of that, it almost seemed as if these numbers for student debt was just crazy. Like I can't even understand. And then not only that, that's a whole nother topic probably, looking at what they're actually going to school for, and if that could ever be repaid, with that type of salary from that position. But I think it's just hit that tipping point, like you said, where people can look and see that they can get all that knowledge somewhere else, or I should say alternative methods. And I'm not necessarily saying that you shouldn't go to college. I'm not saying that by any means, but when people actually see the amount of money that it's going to cost, they kind of start second guessing.
Yep.
Looking at other means.
I'd just add, I'm a generation behind you guys, and my generation, or my period of time in college, which was early 80s, basically, 1980s, a whole century ago, is that it was affordable. I worked part-time. I basically was able to, I lived at home, and I went to the college that was in my town, and I was able to do it as I went. And I really don't think that's possible anymore. You really, just the price of school is so high compared to what you can work part-time and earn. It just doesn't match up anymore, and that's probably where part of the debt problem has gone. The inflation on school costs has just outstripped regular inflation, and it just keeps going up. And then it's just kind of this, you sign your name and you get this $5,000 note for this semester, and then you do it again next semester, and sometimes you have your parents signing off on that with you, and you just have this ball of debt by the time you get out, and then it's like, okay, well, my job doesn't really support this level of debt that I've incurred, and I'm in trouble. And a lot of the talk right now is about the forgiveness of student debt by the government, and somehow there's this feeling that just comes from somewhere magically, and it's like there's no free lunch in this equation as well. There's no free lunch. So if that is being forgiven, I don't know how you really reconcile that with all the people that have paid off their student loans over time and will continue to pay their debt off over time, and that money has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's that's a real catch-22, I think.
So the Biden administration has actually gotten rid of some student loan debt, mainly in colleges, like the private type of colleges, or how do I want to put that? I would almost call them fake colleges. They weren't accredited universities, things like that, but they were eligible for student loan debt. So a lot of those people have had their debt paid off. But I've had school teachers come to me, or attorneys come to me, or people who work in the public service and say, there's a 20-year or a 10-year debt forgiveness on the student loan, as long as I make my payments every year and so forth. But folks, it's like less than 1% of those loans are actually forgiven. So, you spend all these years paying off it with the hope that at the end of 10 years or 12 years, those debts are forgiven by the government. It's extremely rare that it actually happens. So keep in mind that if you're thinking along those lines, do some research on it. So you're going to be, unfortunately, disappointed with what the actual results are. And you never know. I mean, the administration may come out along and wipe out a lot more student debt.
Right.
They seem to be willing to spend money like crazy. So you never know. It's a possibility.
I would just like to add to, we talked a little bit about emotion on credit card debt or any kind of debt, just the emotion of that good feeling about having it paid off. As a parent of kids that have gone through college, there's an emotional tie to this as well. When your 18-year-old kid or 17-year-old kid comes to you and says, I want to go to the school that's $50,000 a year, when they could go to the community college here for $5,000 a year or free or $3,000 a year or whatever it may be, and get a couple years under their belt, there is a maturity in knowing about what that cost payback looks like 5-10 years from now when they're faced with paying the piper, basically. So it's hard because the parent sometimes has to be the gatekeeper to whether you actually go on with that really expensive school, which is the dream, versus the practical, and then the parent, can be the real bad guy in the practical.
But Todd, people are afraid of their kids.
Yes.
You can't tell a kid no today.
Yes, that's true.
I mean, my God, you might get arrested for being a parent.
That's true. You're right.
Unbelievable. So let's talk about car loans, guys. Car loans. We've all had car loans in the past.
Yes.
Folks, taking out $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to buy a car that depreciates in value the second you drive it off the lot is insane. Okay?
And I've seen 84-month terms now on cars.
That's the next thing I was going to mention.
7 years.
That's 7 years now. There's a Cadillac Escalades out there right now that are costing over $100,000 to buy. Now, in the town we live in, you can get a house for $100,000 still. I know out in the East Coast and West Coast, that's a laugh. Yeah. But
I saw a Ford pickup advertised that was over $100,000.
A pickup truck.
It's a really nice pickup. But
how many do you have?
I have none.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He must have been.
I've got my eye on it. Yeah.
So but once again, we're definitely going to put student loans and car loans in the category of bad debt because you're borrowing money at a fairly high interest rate on something that depreciates in value. It's just not worth it. Not worth it at all. And one little buyer's point I'd like to make here. When you go to the car dealership and you're going to finance a car, one of the questions they ask you is how much can you afford per month? Okay? Do not answer that question. Do not answer that question. Because if you go there and say, I can afford $500 a month or $600 a month, they will stretch that term out as long as they can, and they will make that interest rate as high as they possibly can.
And show you the fanciest car.
And show you the fanciest car, et cetera, et cetera. Always buy based on the price of the car and then the interest rate. Don't buy based on the payment amount. Okay?
Yeah. And it's because it's basically a 4-factor formula, basically. You vary any one of the factors and you can make it fit. So right. You can vary the purchase price, you can vary the term, you can vary the interest rate, and you can vary the payment amount.
Yep.
You tell me you can make a $500 payment, I can make
I'll make that work.
I can make that work.
That's right.
The math is not that hard. And
Nope.
if the dealer is better at the math than you are, you're going to lose.
Now, so we're talking about people buying cars on traditional loan basis. What about people who buy leased cars? What about people who lease cars? Terrible. Terrible.
Not a fan of leasing.
Not a fan of leasing myself either.
Pretty large payment. It's a savings in monthly payment amount from what you would have under a loan, but at the end of that 3-year term, and you're boxed into a minimum, a maximum of 15,000 miles a year, 12,000 miles
If
a
you're
year,
lucky.
whatever you buy, or whatever you're paying for. You've got nothing.
I was gonna say,
You're
what do
really
you
kind
have
of
at the end of the
forced.
term, right?
You're really kind of forced into the next lease.
Yeah, Dave Ramsey calls it fleecing.
Fleecing of
For
America.
a reason.
Yes.
Fleecing of America. So stay away from that too. All right. So we've talked about a lot of bad debt right now. Is there any such thing as good debt? Okay. So borrowing money on something that appreciates in value, in my humble opinion, it's pretty good debt. Okay. So the first thing that comes to mind would be land or borrowing for a home. Okay. Most people out there cannot afford, at a young age and put $300,000 down on a home with money out of pocket. So you got to borrow money for that. Okay. This is okay because in most places in the United States, the value of real estate is continuing to go up, partially due to inflation, partially due to supply and demand, et cetera, et cetera. So when you borrow money for a home, though, I'm going to give you a rule that I want you to consider. Never borrow money to the point where your payment's going to be more than 25% of your take-home income on a 15-year note. Okay? You don't want to do 20-year notes. You don't want to do 30-year notes. If you're looking at a ratio, 25% of your take-home income on a 15-year note is really the maximum you should be borrowing.
Is that with taxes and insurance, or just the principal and interest part?
I would say with just the principal and interest part.
Okay.
That will maybe afford you a little bit more home by that aspect. It's just something to do on a day-to-day or on a case-by-case basis, basically is what you're looking at. Okay? So good debt builds value, bad debt loses value, bottom line. Let's talk a little bit about credit scores and history. Anybody ever talk to somebody who brags about their credit score? I do.
I've not really heard bragging about it, but I've definitely had comparisons with people. Actually, I've had it with my wife. Hers is like 4 points higher than mine for whatever reason. And so we have a little talk about that once in a while.
She digs it in on you.
Yeah.
You ever just take a credit card out in her name and then don't pay the bill?
Yeah,
Just
I
so it
should do
drops
that.
down a
I
little
have that
bit.
ability. I know her password. Yeah.
So credit score ranges anywhere from the low 500s up to 850,
In the 800s somewhere.
840, something like that. And basically, the higher the credit score, it shows the bank or the lending person that you're willing to borrow money, and more importantly, you are a good person at paying the monies back. Responsible person. Exactly right. Now, there's some new thought about whether you even need a credit score or not. And I know people hear me say that and they're like, how is that possible? I need a credit score. I need to be in that 700 range. I need to be in that 800 range. Well, when I hear that, what that tells me is you still haven't bought into the concept of being debt-free and being in a cash society. What that's telling me is you're willing at some point in the future to go out and borrow more money. Okay? Because if that credit score is so important to you, that's what you're going to do. Right. Eventually, you're going to finance something else, and you're going to be right back in the same position you were before. So I know it sounds crazy to have a 0 credit score, but it doesn't mean that you're a bad credit risk if you have a 0 credit score. I think that people are starting to realize that if you have a 0 credit score, you're probably even more responsible than the people with the 7 and the 800 credit scores because you're not heavily in debt. You're paying on cash. You can go out and get mortgages with a 0 credit score. There's something you need to do with banks or mortgage brokers that's called manual underwriting. Now, I'm not familiar with the product or process and how that actually works, but a 0 credit score is not a bad thing. It's almost better, in my opinion, than having a super high credit score. Okay, so
I'm not familiar. I've heard this a little bit on radio shows and stuff, but is there a tie in credit score into insurance rating and so on?
Yes. So back in my past life, I sold auto insurance, and I was selling auto insurance around the time where they just started checking credit scores. Okay. And somehow the actuaries and insurance companies have tied credit scores into the possibilities of you getting into a car accident or things like that, having claims. So, but once again, they've had to adjust too.
Right.
You take somebody with a zero credit score who has a few $100,000 sitting in the bank, and who knows what they do for a living, but they're probably not a bad risk.
Right.
Okay. And if you do have a zero credit score and you go talk to your insurance agent, make sure you warn them so they can have a conversation with their underwriters about that.
Yes.
I've purposely worked to get my credit score down to zero.
Yes.
That kind of discussion. But that's a very good point. That's a very good point. Okay. How do you get a good credit score or a bad credit score from a good credit score to a good credit score? Anybody know?
Borrow money and pay it back.
Borrow money, pay it back on time.
Go get
and
a
so
credit
forth.
card and pay it on time.
Go get a credit card and pay it on time. What do you do, like in my situation where my daughter actually turns 21 tomorrow and she has a zero credit score right now, but she's really freaked out about the possibility of needing to borrow money at some point in the future and not having a credit score? What are some things you can do? So I told her, one of the things we can do is we can go out and we can put her cell phone in her name under her own Social Security number or things like that. And then she can make the payments each month. That'll immediately give her a good credit score.
So you're basically saying tie in or have them go directly to the expenses that they have and just pay those off.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not necessarily getting a credit card to make those payments,
Yep.
just whatever expense things that you have in your name or can put under your name.
Yep.
Do that. Okay.
Things like that. Okay. You can put children on your own accounts, that shows a history of payment and stuff like that, so they benefit from it too. So if you're in a situation where your credit score at one time was good, but maybe due to some unforeseen circumstances has dropped, first of all, stop borrowing money, okay, because that's what got you in trouble in the first place. But secondly, just really focus on that budget and start making those payments on time every month. Don't have late fees. Don't be bouncing checks. Don't be doing things like that. It's a pretty simple process to get your credit score back up. Unfortunately, it just takes time, and that's really the biggest problem everybody has is they don't want to wait the time. They want to do it right away. So, okay.
Got one little add to credit score and history. This would be about 2 years ago. We were traveling, and I had my backpack in the rental car. And I had in it my iPad and an old iPhone, which I use as an iPod. And that backpack, the lock got punched on this van. The backpack got stolen, and one of the stupid moves on my part is that in an iPad note, is where I kept all my passwords. So I immediately and the iPad had a password on it, but just the 4-digit password, which is pretty breakable. So I was pretty freaked out about this, and the thing I looked into, locking down credit with LifeLock or something like that, which has a monthly fee to it, and I ultimately did decide on one of those. It wasn't LifeLock, but what I did do, which ties into credit history and score, is I went in and froze my credit on all. With the three major credit reporting agencies, which is a hassle if you go into a store and you want to take advantage of their 10 or 15% off your purchase today if you open a card with us. That's a good thing, actually. Mm-hmm. It is a hassle. It's a blocker. You can't just do that quickly. And if you have a problem with you want to open more credit cards by doing this is a good precaution for yourself, is as well as a security precaution. So our credit right now is frozen. Can't open new credit. It has totally dropped off all the junk mail offers in the mailbox from the credit card companies because they can't query your information to even find out that you're a good risk, and now I want to send you an offer in the mail. So it's ended all of that as well. So that's something I would recommend. It's pretty easy to do. You do need to keep this PIN on hand. Should you ever want to unfreeze it, you need this particular PIN that you would call the agencies or go online in advance of buying something on credit. But that's just
and I'm hoping you don't have that in your Apple Notes now.
I do not.
Okay, good.
I do not have any passwords in Apple
We could
Notes.
probably do a whole show on security.
I have a security system keeper, yes.
Very good. All right. Well, let's close the show up a little bit today. So, sorry, Joe.
Yeah, sorry. I just have a question. So I guess in this question, I'm going to represent any small business owner, probably because I am one. But what would your recommendation be for someone in a small business role as far as credit cards are concerned, or they need something to start up or something like that? What do you kind of recommend?
Well, first of all, I would try to avoid using the credit cards for the small business startup. Okay, if you're going to have to borrow money from anybody, I would probably talk to a local bank. Maybe talk about a small business loan right off the bat. Okay, and of course, the other thing I would tell any person considering a small business is you really have to do some studies as to your cash flow, what's going to be happening, because the last thing you want to do is go out and borrow money from a bank or a credit card. Let's say you rack up $5,000-$10,000 in the first month just buying equipment, but you only get a couple $100s of cash flow coming in. You can get yourself in real big trouble really quick. So I would avoid the credit cards at pretty much all cost. I would definitely have a good relationship with a commercial lender at your local bank, and I would maybe even go so far as maybe even borrow money from a family member or something. Although that's a terrible idea in most cases. But just don't get yourself in that credit card trap by being a new business owner. Okay, and watch those expenses extremely well, making sure that your cash flow on the other side is matching up with that pretty good. Okay.
And there may be programs, I'm really not that familiar with the whole area, but the whole small business development. We have a small business development center here at the community college. They would be a good resource for startup business kind of ideas of what funding might be available out there.
That's a very good point. Very good point. So, all right. So, closing the show now. Debt that builds value is considered a good debt, although really no debt's good, but this is a better debt. Virtually all other debt, in our opinion, is considered bad. Proper management of debt can be acceptable, but no debt is the best. Keep that in mind, folks. Today, my heartfelt thanks goes out to all of you for listening. And as usual, a special thanks to Joe Jolin and Todd Sladky for joining me today and providing all of their input. I want to hear from you. Please reach out to me by either giving me a call at 319-576-2264 or visit our newly designed website at www.greatriverinvestments.com and going to the Contact Us section of the site. I or a member of my team will be in touch with you shortly to discuss our next steps together. Thank you again for listening to the Marvin Knows Finances show. This is Marvin Thomson, your certified financial planner. Have a great day.